Nurse rescues lost boy on highway. The next day, a helicopter lands in her yard. Emily Parker sighed wearily as she drove home after another exhausting shift at the only health clinic in Pleasant Creek, a small town in rural Louisiana. The rain had just begun to fall when her eyes caught something unusual by the roadside. That's when she spotted a small, lone figure. A boy with curly blonde hair, no more than 5 years old, his clothes dirty and his expression frightened. Emily hit the brakes immediately, pulling over on the nearly deserted highway. Her nurse's heart and her human heart wouldn't let her drive past a child alone in such a desolate place. "Hey there, little one. What are you doing out here?" "All by yourself?" Emily asked, stepping carefully closer so as not to scare him further. The boy took a few steps back, hugging himself as if seeking protection. "Don't be afraid. I'm a nurse. I help people." She pointed to her light blue uniform. "My name's Emily. What's yours?" "Ethan," the boy answered in a shaky voice, eyeing her uniform with slightly less suspicion. "Ethan, where are your parents? How did you end up here?" "Grandpa's car broke down," the boy explained, vaguely gesturing toward the road. "He said he'd go get help and told me to wait, but it's taking too long." Emily looked around. There were no stopped vehicles nearby, just the empty road and the rain growing heavier. A sense of unease settled in her chest. "How long ago did your grandpa leave, Ethan?" The boy shrugged. "The sun was still up," he said, pointing at the now darkened sky. Emily frowned. If his grandpa had left while it was still daylight, that meant the boy had been alone for hours. "It's getting cold and the rain's only going to get worse. How about we go to my car?" she offered, holding out her hand. "We can look for your grandpa together." Ethan hesitated, but a loud clap of thunder made him jump. He quickly took Emily's hand. Inside the car, Emily turned on the heater and handed him a small water bottle she always kept in her bag. As the boy drank, she noticed something on his wrist, a hospital bracelet, partially smudged with dirt. "Ethan, have you been in the hospital recently?" The boy looked at his wrist as if only just remembering the bracelet. "Grandpa took me. He works there." Emily drove slowly along the road in both directions, searching for any sign of a broken-down car or the boy's grandpa, but found nothing. The rain was now pouring down, making visibility nearly impossible. "Ethan, I think we should go to my house. It's too dangerous to keep looking in this storm. First thing tomorrow, we'll find your grandpa, I promise." The boy nodded, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Emily's small house was just a few miles away, a simple white wooden home with a front porch, typical of the rural area. Once inside, she quickly drew a warm bath for the boy and dressed him in one of her old t-shirts, which hung on him like a dress. "You must be hungry," Emily said, setting a bowl of leftover soup on the table. As Ethan ate, she tried to learn more. "Do you remember where you were coming from, Ethan?" "The big city," he answered between spoonfuls. "Grandpa said we were going to see my dad." "Your dad? Where is he?" "Never met him," the boy said simply. "Grandpa said he's working far away, saving people, and that now I'll get to know him." Emily tried asking more questions, but the boy was exhausted. Soon after eating, his eyes began to droop. She settled him into her bed and stayed by his side until he fell into a deep sleep. Sitting in the living room with the rain pounding on the roof, Emily examined the hospital bracelet. Part of the identification was illegible, but she could make out the name Ethan and the initials of what appeared to be a last name, MT. On the back was a partially faded logo that looked familiar, possibly from a hospital in the capital, Houston, over 300 kilometers away. She tried using the phone to contact the local police, but the lines were dead, likely damaged by the storm. Her cell phone also had no signal in that remote area, especially during heavy storms. Emily didn't sleep well that night. Every so often she got up to check on Ethan, worrying about the grandfather who might be lost in the storm or worse. She also wondered how a child and an elderly man had ended up on that back road so far from any town. The next morning, the sun rose, revealing the storm's damage. Fallen trees, flooded roads, and still no telecommunications. Emily prepared a simple breakfast while Ethan, now awake, colored at the table with crayons she had saved from her student days. "Ethan, this hospital bracelet has your name on it, doesn't it? Were you sick?" The boy shook his head. "No. Grandpa said I had to wear it so I wouldn't get lost." "And what does your grandpa do at the hospital?" "He's in charge of everyone there," Ethan replied with childish pride. "Everyone calls him Doctor, and he has a big office with his name on the door." As they talked, Emily noticed Ethan had surprising knowledge for such a young child. He used words like stethoscope and antibiotics naturally, as if they were part of his everyday vocabulary. "Grandpa teaches me about medicine," he explained when she expressed surprise. "He says I'll be a doctor like my dad and him." After breakfast, Emily took her bicycle, the only viable transportation on the muddy roads, and with Ethan on the back, pedaled to the home of her nearest neighbor, Old Bill, who lived about a kilometer away. Old Bill, a 70-year-old man who had lived alone since his wife passed, was known for his ham radio, which he used to contact the outside world when storms cut off the area. "Emily, what a surprise!" the old man exclaimed when he saw her arrive with an unfamiliar child. "And who's this little fella?" She quickly explained the situation, and Old Bill immediately offered his radio to try reaching the authorities. After a few failed attempts with the local sheriff's office, they managed to get through to County Memorial Hospital, about 80 kilometers away. "Nursing station, County Memorial St. Mary, over," answered a woman's voice. "This is Emily Parker, nurse from the Pleasant Creek Health Clinic. I found a lost child last night on Route 45. A boy named Ethan, around 4 or 5 years old, was wearing a partially legible hospital bracelet with the initials MT over." There was a moment of silence on the other end before the voice returned, noticeably tenser. "Emily, is the boy okay? Can you put him on? Over." Puzzled by the urgency in her colleague's voice, Emily called Ethan to the radio and showed him how to press the button to speak. "Hi, my name's Ethan," he said shyly. "Ethan?" The woman's voice sounded visibly relieved. "My name's Jennifer. Are you hurt? Over." "No, Aunt Emily gave me food and clean clothes. When is Grandpa coming to get me? Over." "Soon, sweetheart. He's very worried about you. Do you remember your grandpa's full name? Over." "Dr. Richard Thompson," Ethan answered promptly. "Everyone knows my grandpa." Emily's eyes widened when she heard the name. Richard Thompson was one of the most renowned doctors in the United States, a pioneer in pediatric heart surgeries and the current director of the Children's Heart Institute in Houston, a leading institution throughout North America. The institute had exactly the logo she had partially recognized on the bracelet. The hospital nurse quickly explained that Dr. Thompson and his grandson had been missing for nearly 24 hours when the car they were traveling in failed to reach its destination. A search operation was already underway, but the storm had made the efforts difficult. No one knew how they had strayed so far from the main route. "We'll send a team immediately. Please provide your exact coordinates. Over." Old Bill gave the coordinates of his property. The hospital nurse informed them that a team would be on their way as soon as possible, but the storm-damaged roads might delay their arrival. Back at Emily Parker's house, while they waited for news, the nurse tried to keep Ethan entertained. The boy seemed less anxious now that he knew they were going to find his grandfather. "My dad's going to be mad that I got lost," he commented while drawing. "I'm sure he won't. He'll just be happy you're safe," Emily replied. "Have you never met your dad?" "Only in pictures. Grandpa has lots of photos of him at his house." "And why haven't you met him before?" Ethan shrugged with that simple honesty only children have. "Grandpa says he works really far away, where people need doctors a lot, but now he's back for an important surgery, and Grandpa said we'll see him." Emily was intrigued. Who was? Ethan's father. Surely someone important in the medical field, considering who his grandfather was. And what kind of circumstances would keep a man away from his own son for so long? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Around noon, as Emily prepared a simple lunch with what she had in the pantry, a deafening noise made the house shake. Ethan ran to the window. "A helicopter!" he shouted excitedly. "Like the one my dad uses sometimes." Emily could hardly believe her eyes. A large medical helicopter was landing in the open field beside her house. The logo of the Children's Heart Institute was clearly visible on the side of the aircraft. When the rotors finally slowed, the door opened, and an elderly but commanding man hurried out, followed by a medical team. His grey hair fluttered in the residual wind from the blades. "Grandpa!" Ethan yelled, running out of the house. "Dr. Richard." Thompson opened his arms to embrace his grandson, holding him tightly, visibly emotional. "Ethan, thank God you're all right." He quickly checked the boy over with a doctor's trained eyes. "Are you hurt? Is everything okay?" "Aunt Emily took care of me. She's a nurse too, just like the ladies at your hospital." The doctor finally looked up at Emily, who stood watching from the porch of her simple home. He approached, still holding his grandson's hand. "Miss Parker?" he asked, extending his free hand. "I have no words to thank you for looking after my grandson." "I just did what anyone would do, Doctor," Emily replied, awed to be standing before a legend of American medicine. "But what happened? How did you end up on that back road?" The doctor sighed deeply. "Our driver decided to take a shortcut when he heard the main highway was jammed. It was a terrible mistake. The car broke down in a remote area with no cell signal. I decided to walk for help, leaving Ethan safe in the vehicle." He paused, guilt clear in his expression. "I hadn't even walked a kilometer when I suddenly fell ill. A heart condition I've been ignoring for months." "You fainted on the road?" asked Emily, horrified. "Yes. Luckily, a truck driver found me and took me to the nearest hospital. As soon as I regained consciousness, I started searching for Ethan. But no one could find the car on the road. The storm made everything harder." He looked at his grandson with tear-filled eyes. "When I heard he'd been found safe and sound, I pulled every string I could to get here as fast as possible." One of the medical team members approached. "Dr. Thompson, we need to leave soon. Dr. Michael is already in the operating room preparing everything." Emily noticed how Ethan suddenly perked up at the name. "Is that my dad?" the boy asked anxiously, looking at his grandfather. Dr. Thompson nodded. "Yes, Ethan. Your father is performing a very important surgery today. We need to hurry back so you can finally meet him." Emily felt a pang of curiosity. Who is Ethan's father, if it's not too forward to ask? The doctor smiled with pride. "My son, Dr. Michael Thompson, one of the best heart surgeons I've ever trained. He spent the last 5 years working on humanitarian missions in Africa and Asia, developing surgical techniques for areas with limited resources." He paused. "An admirable dedication, but one that unfortunately kept him away from his son and family." "And Ethan's mother?" Emily couldn't hold back the question. A shadow crossed the older man's face. "My daughter-in-law passed away during childbirth. It was a blow Michael never fully recovered from. He threw himself into his work, leaving Ethan in my care." Dr. Thompson looked at his grandson tenderly. "This trip is an attempt to reconnect. Michael returned to the United States to perform a groundbreaking surgery on a special patient, and I thought it would be the perfect chance to bring father and son together." Emily felt deep empathy for their family situation. As a nurse in an underserved community, she understood the call of medical duty, but she also often saw the price families paid for that dedication. "Dr. Thompson," the helicopter pilot said, approaching, "we have a problem. The weather is worsening again, and forecasts say we only have a 30-minute window for safe flight. After that, we'll be stuck here until tomorrow." The doctor looked distressed. "But Michael needs me for the surgery. It's an extremely delicate procedure." "You don't seem in any condition to assist in surgery," Emily said with professional honesty, noting the pallor and exhaustion on the older man's face, especially after an untreated heart episode. "I have no choice," he replied. "This surgery is for the state governor. We need every available team member." Emily felt a sudden, almost inexplicable impulse. "I can help," she offered, surprising, even herself. "I've worked in this region for 8 years, often improvising with limited resources. I know I don't have specialized training for heart surgery, but I can assist, handle instruments." Dr. Thompson studied her for a thoughtful moment. "You'd be willing to come with us? Leave your post just like that without notice?" "I can call my supervisor at the clinic on Old Bill's radio. I'm sure she'll understand the emergency," Emily replied, feeling a mix of adrenaline and apprehension. The doctor checked his watch, clearly torn between the urgent need to return and his concern for his grandson's well-being after the ordeal. "Miss Parker, I'll accept your offer." "With gratitude. But I must be honest. The surgery my son will perform today is experimental and extremely risky. Your presence will be valuable, but the procedure itself, is it a minimally invasive myocardial revascularization with internal mammary artery graft guided by three-dimensional fluoroscopy?" Emily finished. Dr. Thompson stared at her, genuinely surprised. "How did you know that?" Emily smiled timidly. "I read every scientific article I can get my hands on, Doctor. Your son's work on techniques adapted for regions without proper infrastructure inspired me to keep working here, despite all the difficulties." She hesitated. "I never imagined I'd one day meet the family behind those groundbreaking studies." A glimmer of recognition and respect appeared in the old doctor's eyes. "Go get what you need, miss. We leave in 15 minutes." Emily rushed inside to gather her documents and a few clothes. The thought of flying in a helicopter for the first time, visiting the Children's Heart Institute, and possibly witnessing a revolutionary surgery made her both nervous and excited. As she packed a small bag, she heard Ethan's voice from the open bedroom door. "Aunt Emily, you're going to meet my dad," the boy exclaimed excitedly. "He's the best doctor in the world, you know." "Your grandfather said the same thing," she replied, smiling. "Are you excited to meet him?" Ethan nodded, but then his expression turned serious, with a maturity surprising for his age. "What if he doesn't like me?" he asked quietly. Emily's heart ached. She knelt to meet his eye level. "Ethan, your father will love you instantly, just like I do and everyone who knows you. You're an amazing boy." The child's face lit up with a smile. "Will you stay with us in the big city too?" "Only for a little while. I have my work here. People need me." "But there are lots of people there who need doctors too," Ethan argued with the simple logic of a child. "My dad says that in the letters he sends to Grandpa." Emily smiled, touched by his innocence. How could she explain to a child the complexities that kept healthcare workers like her tied to remote communities, where they were the only hope for hundreds of people? Minutes later, they were aboard the helicopter. Ethan, thrilled by his first flight, pressed his face against the window while Dr. Thompson checked his vitals once more. Emily, meanwhile, marveled at the Louisiana landscape from above, the vast bayou plains, winding rivers, and small communities dotting the horizon like tiny islands of civilization. "First time in a helicopter?" Dr. Thompson asked, noticing her awe. "First time leaving the region in almost 5 years," she admitted, "since I graduated and came here. The countryside has that effect on people. It binds us with invisible ties of need and purpose," he remarked with the wisdom of someone who understood this reality well. "It was the same for my son, too, in the remote communities he worked in. The difference is, he could never put down roots anywhere." During the 40-minute flight to Houston, Dr. Thompson shared more about his son, Michael. A Harvard honors graduate, he had followed his father's footsteps into cardiology, but chose a different path. Instead of the stability of a major urban hospital, he dedicated himself to developing surgical techniques for resource-poor regions, joining international humanitarian organizations. After losing his wife, Catherine, during Ethan's complicated birth, Michael withdrew emotionally from everything and everyone, including his own son, the doctor explained with sorrow. "He left the baby in my care and left for his first mission just 3 months later. He said he couldn't look at his son without remembering that his existence cost the life of the woman he loved." "What a terrible situation," Emily remarked, glancing at Ethan, who seemed oblivious to the conversation, engrossed in the aircraft's glowing controls that the co-pilot was kindly showing him. Over the years, Michael stayed in touch through video calls and letters, sent gifts, but never spent more than 2 weeks straight with his son. "Ethan grew up calling me Dad until he understood, a little over a year ago, that I was his grandfather and his real father was out saving lives around the world." Emily sensed the pain in the old man's words, the weight of raising a grandson while watching his own son shirk his fatherly duties. "This surgery he's performing." "Today," Dr. Thompson continued, represents everything he's worked for these past years. It's the culmination of his research, a revolutionary procedure that can be done with basic equipment, bringing advanced heart surgeries to remote regions. He paused meaningfully. And it's also the reason I finally managed to convince him to meet Ethan. How so? Today's patient is a 6-year-old child with a heart condition similar to the one that killed Catherine. Michael agreed to perform the surgery as a form of redemption, I believe. The conversation was cut short as the helicopter began its descent. Emily saw the imposing complex of the Children's Heart Institute emerge on the horizon, a cluster of modern buildings standing out against the surrounding landscape. As soon as they landed, they were greeted by a flurry of medical staff. A middle-aged woman in a lab coat, her expression tense, hurried over. "Dr. Thompson, thank goodness you're here, Dr. Michael is already in the prep room. The patient was sedated 20 minutes ago. Dr. Roberts, this is Emily Parker, the nurse who found Ethan and offered us assistance. She's familiar with the techniques Michael developed." He turned to Emily. "Dr. Susan Roberts is the head nurse at the Institute." Susan gave Emily a quick nod, clearly focused on the impending surgery. "I'll take her to prep right away. The procedure can't wait." "What about Ethan?" Emily asked, concerned. "We have a special waiting area for family," Susan replied. "He'll be well taken care of by our support team." Dr. Thompson knelt to speak with his grandson. "Ethan, I need to go help your father now. You'll stay with some very nice people for a few hours, and then finally we'll introduce you to your dad." "Okay?" The boy nodded bravely, though Emily could see a flicker of anxiety in his eyes. "Is Aunt Emily coming too?" "Yes, I'll help your father and grandfather. I promise we'll be back soon," she assured him, surprised by the bond she'd formed with the boy in such a short time. The next few minutes passed in a blur for Emily. She was quickly led to a prep room, given surgical scrubs, went through the sterilization process, and received basic instructions on the Institute's protocols. Everything was so different from her small rural clinic, where she often improvised with the limited resources available. When she finally entered the operating room, she felt momentarily intimidated by the high-tech environment and the highly specialized team already in position. At the center of the room, his back to the door, a tall man was meticulously adjusting a piece of equipment she recognized as a portable 3D fluoroscopy system, one of the innovations described in Dr. Michael Thompson's papers. "Michael, I brought reinforcements," Dr. Thompson announced. The man turned and Emily saw Ethan's father's face for the first time. He was a younger version of Dr. Thompson, with the same piercing eyes but with an almost feverish intensity in his gaze. His face bore equal marks of exhaustion and determination. "Dad, I didn't think I'd make it in time," he said, then noticed Emily. "And who's this?" "This is Emily Parker, the nurse who found and cared for Ethan when we got separated in the storm. She offered to assist with the surgery." Michael slightly furrowed his brow. "I appreciate the help, but this procedure requires—" "She knows your work," his father interrupted, "and she has experience with emergency care in rough conditions. Exactly the kind of perspective you value in your research." Michael studied Emily for a moment, as if assessing her professionally. "Have you assisted in heart surgeries before?" he asked. "Only twice during my training. But I've studied your articles extensively on techniques adapted for regions with limited resources." Something in his gaze shifted subtly. "Very well, you can assist with instrumentation. Susan will guide you." The next few hours were the most intense of Emily's professional life. The surgery was complex and groundbreaking, blending traditional techniques with revolutionary adaptations. The patient, a 6-year-old boy with severe congenital heart disease, had a condition most medical centers would consider inoperable without cutting-edge equipment. Emily watched in awe as Michael Thompson turned limitations into advantages, using techniques that could be replicated in field hospitals or rural facilities with minimal resources. At several critical moments, her skills as a rural nurse proved invaluable, offering practical solutions that pleasantly surprised the team. During one particularly tense moment, when a piece of equipment briefly malfunctioned, Emily quickly suggested an adaptation she'd used at the health clinic. Michael looked at her over his surgical mask, his eyes revealing a mix of surprise and approval. "Exactly the kind of improvisation I advocate in my articles," he remarked. "Where did you learn that?" "From daily practice in Pleasant Creek," she replied. "When you're the only healthcare professional within a 50-mile radius, creativity becomes an essential skill." After nearly 5 hours, the surgery was successfully completed. The young patient's heart responded well, his vitals stabilized, and the team could finally breathe a sigh of relief. "Standard closure from here," Michael announced to the team, stepping back from the operating table after checking the final parameters. "Dr. Williams will take over. Excellent work, everyone." In the prep room, as they removed their protective gear, Emily finally had a chance to speak directly with Michael. "Your son is amazing," she remarked, breaking the silence. "He has your medical knowledge, used technical terms that would surprise anyone coming from such a young child." Michael paused, visibly affected by the mention of his son. "Ethan has always been precocious," he replied, his voice restrained. "My father says he memorized medication names at 3, just by flipping through books in the office. He's very eager to meet you." Michael removed his surgical cap, revealing dark hair already streaked with premature gray. For a moment, he seemed vulnerable, almost afraid. "I don't know if I'm ready," he confessed quietly. "I don't know how to be a father." "No one does at first," Emily answered gently. "It's scary for everyone. For me, it's different. He stopped, as if searching for the right words. "Every time I think of Ethan, I remember his life cost me my wife's. It's irrational, I know. Clinically, I know it. Wasn't his fault. But emotionally, he's not to blame," Emily said firmly. "And he needs his father. That boy traveled hundreds of miles, got lost in a storm, all just to finally meet you." Before Michael could respond, Dr. Thompson entered the room, his face beaming with satisfaction. "The surgery was a complete success. The post-op parameters are better than we anticipated." He looked at his son with pride. "Your technique worked perfectly, Michael." "The team was exceptional," Michael replied, regaining his professional composure. "And Miss Parker proved to be a valuable asset." Dr. Thompson checked his watch. "Ethan is waiting in the break room. It's been nearly 6 hours since we arrived." He gave his son a meaningful look. "He's asked for you several times." Michael took a deep breath, the internal conflict clear on his face. "Let's go," he said finally, with forced determination. The walk to the break room was silent. Emily could feel the tension building in Michael with every step, as if he were walking not toward a son, but some kind of judgment. When they opened the door, they found Ethan asleep on a couch, clutching an illustrated book about the human body. One of the nurse's aides explained that he had fought sleep as long as he could, eager to meet his father. Michael stopped in the doorway, watching his son from a distance. Emily noticed his hands trembling slightly. "He has her eyes," Michael murmured almost inaudibly. "Every time they send photos, I see Catherine's eyes staring back at me." Dr. Thompson placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Ethan needs a father, Michael, not a ghost haunted by guilt." Michael slowly approached the couch, kneeling beside his sleeping son. Hesitantly, he reached out and gently touched the boy's curly hair. The gesture seemed to wake him. Ethan blinked sleepily, his vision adjusting before he finally registered the face in front of him. He sat up suddenly, wide awake. "Are you my dad?" he asked directly, with the honesty only a child could muster. Michael seemed momentarily speechless, only nodding. "You look just like in the pictures," Ethan exclaimed, surprising everyone with his enthusiasm. Without warning, the boy threw himself forward, hugging his father for the first time. Emily saw Michael's body stiffen at first from the unexpected contact, but then, gradually, his arms wrapped around his son's small frame, returning the embrace hesitantly at first, then with growing intensity. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come see you," Michael said, his voice thick with years of pent-up emotion. "It's okay," Ethan replied simply. "Grandpa told me you were saving other kids who didn't have other doctors. Today you saved another. One, right?" A choked sob escaped Michael, startling everyone in the room, including himself. Emily felt her own eyes well up witnessing this moment of reconnection. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, Back to the story. Dr. Thompson made a discreet gesture to Emily, signaling they should give father and son privacy. Quietly, they stepped out and closed the door. 5 years, the older man said once they were in the hallway. 5 years waiting for this moment. I feared Michael would never find the courage to face his demons. I think he needed this trigger, Emily remarked. Today's surgery, saving a child with the same condition that took his wife's life, it was a form of redemption. And meeting you and Ethan under those circumstances wasn't just a coincidence. Dr. Thompson looked at her gratefully. Your care for Ethan, your presence in the surgery, all of this helped Michael see that there are solutions, not just losses. They walked to an observation area overlooking the gardens of the Institute. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange. Do you have plans to return to Pleasant Creek right away? Dr. Thompson asked, after a few moments of thoughtful silence. I should get back to the clinic as soon as possible. I'm the only permanent nurse in the area. The doctor nodded, deep in thought. I understand your dedication, but allow me to make a proposal. He turned to face her directly. What would you say to establishing a partnership between the Institute and your health clinic? Emily stared at him, surprised. What kind of partnership? My son has developed surgical techniques and equipment adapted for regions with limited resources. Your clinic could become a pilot center for implementing these innovations. We could provide training, equipment. That would be extraordinary, Emily replied, barely able to grasp the magnitude of the offer. But why? Why our clinic in particular? Dr. Thompson smiled. Because I've found something rare in you, Miss Parker. The same spirit I see in my son when he's in the field. Determination, creativity, and a genuine commitment to the patient above any rigid protocol or apparent limitation. But I'm just a rural clinic nurse. And my son was just a newly graduated doctor when he decided to revolutionize cardiac procedures for remote areas, the older man countered. Sometimes the greatest innovations come from those who face the biggest limitations. Emily was momentarily speechless, trying to absorb the impact such a partnership would have on her community. I'd need to discuss this with my supervisor and the county health department, of course, she finally said. Naturally, in the meantime, I'd like you to consider spending a few weeks here at the Institute for training. He paused meaningfully. And if I may be frank, your presence would be good for Ethan and for Michael. Before Emily could respond, the door to the lounge opened, and Michael stepped out with Ethan on his shoulders, both smiling in a way that warmed Emily's heart. Dad, I'm going to show Ethan the simulation center. He's dying to see the anatomical models, Michael announced, his enthusiasm a stark contrast to his earlier demeanor. Emily, would you like to join us? The friendly tone and his use of her first name didn't escape Emily, who exchanged a meaningful glance with Dr. Thompson. I'd love to, she replied, smiling. The following weeks were transformative for Emily. What had started as a simple rescue of a lost child on the highway had unfolded into a professional opportunity she never imagined possible. At the Institute, she received advanced training in procedures that could be adapted for her rural clinic. Michael, now genuinely interested in the partnership his father had proposed, personally guided her through several sessions, impressed by her ability to adapt sophisticated techniques to rural realities. Ethan became a constant presence during her time at the Institute. The boy seemed to have developed a special attachment to Emily, often referring to her as the aunt who saved me from the storm. The relationship between father and son, initially hesitant, blossomed day by day. Michael, confronted with the child's unconditional love, gradually left behind the ghosts of his past. After 3 weeks of intensive training, the time came for Emily to return to Pleasant Creek. The partnership between the Institute and the health clinic had been formalized, with the first shipment of adapted equipment scheduled for the following month. On the eve of her departure, Emily was invited to dinner at the Thompsons' residence, an elegant home on the outskirts of Houston. It was the first time she saw Michael and Ethan in a completely familiar setting, far from the hospital environment. Aunt Emily, Ethan exclaimed as he opened the door, hugging her legs. Come see what my dad gave me. The boy pulled her by the hand into the living room, where a small children's microscope was set up on the coffee table, with several prepared slides beside it. "It's just like the one he uses at work, only my size." "Impressive," Emily remarked, genuinely charmed by the child's enthusiasm. "And what have you discovered with it so far?" As Ethan excitedly explained about plant cells and salt crystals, Emily noticed Michael watching from the kitchen doorway, a faint smile on his lips. "He hasn't stopped talking about science since he got that microscope," Michael commented, stepping closer. "I think we have another doctor in the family." The dinner was surprisingly relaxed. Dr. Thompson shared stories from Michael's youth, sparking laughter around the table. Ethan bombarded Emily with questions about animals and plants from the bayou, fascinated by the biodiversity of the region where she lived. By the end of the evening, after Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from all the excitement, Michael walked Emily out to the porch. "I wanted to thank you," he said after a moment of thoughtful silence. "Not just for taking care of Ethan that night, but for—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "For helping me find my way back to him." "You would have found that path eventually," Emily replied softly. "Your love for your son was always there, just blocked by grief." Michael gazed at the starry sky for a few seconds. "Did you know our first project together won't be at your clinic?" he said, changing the subject. "No?" Emily looked at him, confused. "No, it'll be at the County Memorial Hospital, about 50 miles from Pleasant Creek." Michael smiled at her surprised expression. "We're implementing an adapted surgical center there first, equipped with our portable prototypes. That means I'll be in the area at least 2 weeks a month for the next 6 months." "Oh," Emily exclaimed, feeling a sudden warmth in her cheeks. "That's wonderful for the project. And I thought maybe—" Michael suddenly seemed less confident, almost shy. "Maybe Ethan could stay with me during those trips. He'd love to see the bayou and we could visit you in Pleasant Creek." Emily smiled, touched by the suggestion, proof of how much he had grown in such a short time as a father. "He'd be more than welcome. There's so much for a curious child like him to discover there." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled only by the nighttime sounds of the garden. "When I met you in the operating room, I thought you were just another dedicated professional," Michael admitted, after a moment. "I never imagined you'd change my life so much in such a short time. Sometimes the most unexpected encounters are the ones that transform us the most," Emily replied, remembering the small figure by the roadside who had completely redirected her path. The next morning, Emily returned to Pleasant Creek by helicopter, accompanied by a technical team that would conduct the initial assessment of the clinic for the future installations. When the aircraft landed in the same field beside her house, she couldn't help but smile, recalling the day a similar helicopter had arrived unexpectedly, changing her life. Old Bill and several locals had gathered at a distance, watching in, or as the aircraft and the technical team bustled about. For that small community, the partnership with the renowned Children's Heart Institute was almost a miracle. "Emily!" called her supervisor, Mrs. Wilson, hurrying over as soon as she stepped off the helicopter. "Is this all really true? Is the Institute really bringing equipment for us?" "It's true, Mrs. Wilson," Emily confirmed, hugging her colleague. "And there's more. We're going to be a training center for techniques adapted to rural areas. Doctors and nurses from all over the country will come to learn here." Mrs. Wilson, a 63-year-old woman who had managed the clinic for over 2 decades, couldn't hold back her tears. After all these years struggling to keep this clinic running, with so little, I never imagined we'd come to this. And all because you stopped to help a lost boy on the road. Emily smiled, thinking about how small decisions could trigger such significant changes. Sometimes fate puts certain people in our path for a reason, she reflected. Ethan, Dr. Michael, Dr. Thompson, each of them changed my life in some way. In the weeks that followed, the small health clinic in Pleasant Creek underwent remarkable transformations. Modern equipment adapted for rural realities began arriving, the physical structure was expanded, and new professionals were hired to join the growing team. Emily, now the project implementation coordinator, divided her time between patient care and the ongoing training she received remotely from the Institute's team. Every new skill she learned meant more lives she could save in that isolated region. A month after her return, Emily received an unexpected call through the newly installed communication system at the clinic. "Emily," Michael's voice came through the line, "we're arriving tomorrow for the first phase of implementation at the County Memorial Hospital. Ethan is with me and insisted we visit you first." Emily's heart raced at the news. "It'll be a pleasure to have you here," she replied, realizing how much she had missed them, especially little Ethan. The next day, an official institute car pulled up in front of her house. Before the vehicle even came to a full stop, Ethan was already jumping out, running toward Emily with contagious excitement. "Aunt Emily, I brought my microscope. I want to see the bayou critters." Michael stepped out of the car more calmly, carrying a small suitcase and smiling in a way that lit up his eyes, a serene, almost happy expression Emily hadn't seen before. "He hasn't talked about anything else the whole trip," Michael remarked, as he approached. "The bayou critters, the alligators, the capybaras. I think we've created a little scientist." The weekend that followed was filled with small adventures. Emily took them to explore safe spots in the nearby bayou, guided Ethan in collecting water and plant samples for his microscope, and introduced them to the locals, who welcomed them with the warm hospitality typical of rural America. One quiet afternoon, while Ethan was busy watching ants in the yard, Michael and Emily sat on the porch watching the region's signature sunset, a vibrant orange spectacle painting the sky in vivid gradients. "This place has something special," Michael remarked, breaking the contemplative silence. "I understand now why you never wanted to leave despite all the hardships." "When I first got here, fresh out of school, I only planned to stay a year," Emily admitted. "But the people, the feeling of being truly needed, the difference I can. It all kept me here." "That's how I feel on international missions," he agreed. "The difference is I've never been able to put down roots anywhere. I always move on to the next challenge, the next crisis, the next community in need." "Running away?" asked Emily gently. Michael looked at her, initially surprised by her frankness, but then nodded. "Probably." He turned his gaze back to the horizon. "But being with Ethan these past few weeks has made me realize how much I've missed by hiding behind work. He's growing up so fast, and I almost lost all of that." "It's never too late to start over," Emily offered, lightly touching his arm in a comforting gesture. Michael covered her hand with his, a brief but meaningful contact. "I think I needed to find a balance," he continued, "between the doctor who saves strangers around the world and the father Ethan deserves. This project here with the County Memorial Hospital and its health clinic seems to be that middle ground." Just then, Ethan ran up to them, carefully, holding something in his hands. "Dad! Aunt Emily, look what I found!" It was a tiny green frog, no bigger than a coin, which the boy examined with fascination. "It's a tree frog," Emily explained. "They're very common here, after the rains." Ethan studied the small amphibian with scientific admiration. "Can I put it in my discovery journal?" he asked, referring to the notebook Michael had given him to record his nature observations. "Of course," his father replied, "but we'll need to return it to its habitat afterward, okay?" "Okay," Ethan agreed eagerly, running. Back to his research, Michael smiled, watching his son walk away. "He has such a big heart," he remarked with obvious fatherly pride. "He reminds me so much of his mother in that way." Catherine loved animals, especially the small and fragile ones. It was the first time Michael had mentioned his late wife without pain dominating his expression. There was a quiet, almost sweet nostalgia in his voice. "What was she like?" Emily asked, seizing the opening. "Intense, passionate about everything she did," he answered with a wistful smile. "She was a pediatrician. We met during residency. She had this natural gift with children, an instant connection I always envied a little. Ethan seems to have inherited that. He connects with people so easily." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "For years I avoided talking about her, as if saying her name would make the loss more real." He paused. "Now I realize I was denying Ethan the chance to know his mother, even if just through my memories. It's never too late to change that," Emily encouraged. "Tell him stories about her, show him photos, share memories. Children have an incredible ability to bring people they've never physically met into their emotional lives." Michael looked at Emily with gratitude and something more, something that made her heart skip a beat. "You have a gift, you know," he said, "seeing beyond appearances, beyond the defenses we build. Part of being a nurse in a small community," she replied, downplaying the compliment. "We have to understand what isn't said, the stories behind physical complaints. It's more than that." Michael held her gaze. "It's a natural empathy, an innate wisdom. Ethan sensed it immediately, and so did my father. That's why he was so determined to bring you to the Institute." A silence filled with unspoken possibilities settled between them, broken only when Ethan came running back, excited by another discovery. The weekend passed quickly, and soon it was time for Michael and Ethan to return to the County Memorial Hospital, where the real work of the project would begin. The farewell was emotional, with Ethan promising to return the next weekend with his full, traditional Bayou scientist kit. "We'll stay in constant contact for the project, of course," Michael said, already in the car. "But I'd also like to call for other reasons, if you don't mind." Emily smiled, suddenly feeling like a teenager again. "I'd love to," she simply replied. In the months that followed, the project to implement adapted medical technologies progressed significantly. The County Memorial Hospital received its first surgical center equipped with the prototypes developed by Michael, and the health clinic in Pleasant Creek became a model of excellence for rural care. Michael and Ethan became regular presences in Emily's life. At first, the visits were justified by the project, but over time, professional barriers faded, giving way to a deep friendship and, gradually, something more. One starry night, 6 months after their chance meeting on the road, Michael, Emily, and Ethan sat on her porch, watching the exceptionally clear sky over the bayou. Ethan had fallen asleep in a hammock after a day full of exploration and discovery. "We need to talk about the future," Michael said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. "The future of the project?" Emily asked, though she suspected that wasn't what he meant. "Our future," he clarified, turning to face her. "Mine, yours, and Ethan's." Emily's heart raced. "What do you have in mind?" "The initial phase of the project is nearly complete. Soon I'll need to return to Houston more often." He paused. "But I don't want to lose what we've built here. Ethan is thriving, happier than I've ever seen him. And he hesitated, searching for the right words. "I've found a peace I haven't felt in years." Emily felt a wave of apprehension. Was this it? A gentle goodbye? "I've been thinking," Michael continued, moving closer to her on the small porch bench. "What if we expanded the project, established a permanent research base here in Pleasant Creek, integrated with the clinic and County Memorial Hospital?" "That would be incredible for the community," Emily replied carefully. "I'm not just thinking about the community," Michael admitted, taking her hand. "I'm thinking about us, about building something together. Not just a medical project, but a life. Here, where it all began." Emily stared at him, barely able to process what she was hearing. Are you suggesting moving to Pleasant Creek?" "I'm suggesting we find a way forward together." Michael gently squeezed her hand. "Over these past months, you've become an essential part of Ethan's life, and mine. The way you helped him connect with his roots, understand his mother. How you helped me rediscover the joy of being a father." "Michael, I'm not asking for an answer now," he interrupted gently. "I know it's complicated, that we have established careers in different places. I just want you to know I'm willing to find a balance, an arrangement that lets us continue what we've started here." Tears welled in Emily's eyes, moved, not just by his words, but by the complete transformation of the man before her. From the distant surgeon haunted by guilt to the loving father and vulnerable man now bearing his heart. "I never imagined stopping to help a lost boy on the road would change my life so profoundly," she confessed. "And I never imagined a helicopter landing in your backyard would be the start of a new journey for all of us," he replied, lifting her hand to his lips in a tender gesture. Nearby, Ethan stirred sleepily, opening his eyes for a moment. Seeing his father and Emily together on the porch, he smiled and drifted back to sleep, feeling safe and loved in his newly expanded world. 3 months later, the old health clinic in Pleasant Creek had been transformed into the Advanced Rural Research and Care Center, the first in a network that would expand across the rural United States. Emily, now the operations director of the center, led an expanded team of professionals, implementing the innovations that continued to be developed by Michael and his team. A small house was built near the center, where Michael, Ethan, and Emily began living as a family. On weekends, Dr. Thompson, the grandfather, often joined them, delighted by his son and grandson's new life, and genuinely proud of the medical legacy that would now span generations, reaching those most in need. On a special afternoon, exactly 1 year after their encounter on the road, the entire community of Pleasant Creek gathered to inaugurate the center's expansion and celebrate the achievements so far. Hundreds of specialized treatments completed, dozens of successful surgeries, and a significant reduction in infant mortality in the region. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. During the simple ceremony, Michael shared how the initiative had impacted his personal and professional life, emphasizing how the chance meeting between Emily and Ethan had been the catalyst for a transformation now benefiting entire communities. For years, I dedicated my life to developing medical techniques for remote areas, always traveling from place to place, never putting down roots, he told the small gathered crowd. But it took my own son getting lost on a road for me to find my true purpose. Not just creating technologies that could be taken to distant places, but establishing permanent centers that continuously transform lives. Emily, with Ethan resting against her hip, watched proudly as the man who had become not only her life partner, but also a symbol of hope for the entire region. The boy, now 6, wore a small personalized lab coat with the center's logo, a gift from the team who adored him. After the ceremony, as the community celebrated with a traditional Bayou-style feast, Emily found a quiet moment with Michael on a bench beneath a large mango tree shading the center's courtyard. "A whole year," she remarked, watching Ethan play with other local children. "It feels like just yesterday I found him alone by the roadside. And at the same time, it feels like a lifetime," Michael added, holding her hand, as if everything before that moment was just preparation for what truly matters. Emily rested her head on his shoulder, feeling complete. "Do you believe in destiny?" she asked softly. "That some people are placed in our path for a greater reason?" Michael smiled, remembering the unlikely chain of events that had brought them together. A broken-down car, a fainting spell, a storm, a dedicated nurse who stopped to help a lost boy, a helicopter landing in a rural backyard. "I believe life offers us opportunities disguised as chance," he replied. "And it's up to us to recognize and embrace them." Across the courtyard, Dr. Thompson chatted animatedly with local officials about expanding the project to neighboring towns. The elderly man, who had initially planned only a brief visit to reunite with his son and grandson, now devoted much of his time to the center's development, inspired by the transformation he'd witnessed in Michael's life. By day's end, as the guests departed and the center returned to its peaceful routine, Emily, Michael, and Ethan walked together to the porch of their shared home, watching the sun set over the bayou, the same spectacle they'd admired countless times, yet one that never lost its magic. "Aunt Emily," called Ethan, using the affectionate term that had stuck even after she became a mother figure in his life, "do you think Mom would be happy to see us together like this?" The question, asked with a child's characteristic innocence, deeply moved both Emily and Michael. Over the past few months following her advice, Michael had shared countless stories and photographs of Catherine with his son, allowing him to build an emotional connection with the mother he had never physically known. "I'm sure she would." "Sweetheart," Emily replied, hugging him tenderly, "mothers want nothing more than for their children to be happy and loved, and you are so very loved." Michael wrapped them both in an embrace, forming a complete circle. On his face, there were no traces of the guilt he had carried for years, only gratitude for this second chance fate had granted him through what seemed like a random encounter on a rural road. That evening, as Ethan slept peacefully in his room, Decorated with anatomical drawings, maps of the bayou, and photographs of his mother, Michael and Emily stayed on the porch, contemplating the future they were building together. "Tomorrow, the new training team from Washington, D.C. arrives," Emily mentioned, checking her planner. "And next week we'll have the visit from the Department of Health representatives to evaluate the possible expansion of the program," Michael added. For a moment, both mentally worked through the next steps of the project, which had now grown far bigger than them, a rural healthcare model that could revolutionize public health in remote regions across the country. Then, as if by mutual agreement, they closed their planners and set them aside. "That can wait until tomorrow," Michael said, pulling her closer. "Right now is our time." Emily smiled, nestling into his arms. Professionally, they had created something revolutionary, a legacy that would impact generations. Personally, they had found each other through extraordinary circumstances: a rural nurse, a world-renowned doctor, and a little lost boy who, unknowingly, changed everyone's destiny. On the horizon, the last traces of orange light gave way to the starry blanket characteristic of the bayou sky. Endless, mysterious, and full of possibilities, just like the future they now shared. The end. And what did you think of this transformation in Emily's life? Small decisions can completely change our destinies. Share in the comments what touched your heart most in this story and where you're following us from. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next emotional stories.